Bonjour, mes chers amis. Good day. I'm Dr. Adam Deville from the University of St. Francis, and I'm delighted to take part in this symposium. In this brief presentation, I want to talk to you today about two things needful: structures of accountability and of healing. Since at least 1992, when the first major Episcopal statement about sex abuse in the Catholic Church appeared in my native Canada, there has been throughout the entire Catholic world a consistent and unthinking refusal even to consider that this abuse crisis would in any way require systemic or structural alterations to the hierarchical ordering of the Church. It is rather, we're told, a problem solely of individuals, the proverbial few bad apples. And this problem can therefore be dealt with by means of closer individual scrutiny and screening. Thus, we've seen some tweaks made to seminary admissions, and we run everybody on the diocesan payroll through a background check or a webinar on safe parishes, and that's really all that's necessary. Nothing else need be changed. This blithe certainty that nothing else needs major alteration apart from heightened individual scrutiny must now be seen for the reaction formation that it is. Freud first recognized a reaction formation as a defense mechanism that seeks to protect against dramatic changes, even, and sometimes especially, those that would actually promote healing. A reaction formation is born of a widespread and neurotic fear of what such changes might entail. And to prevent such changes from gaining any kind of foothold, even in the imagination, the very opposite course of action is strenuously insisted upon. The Catholic response to the ongoing abuse crisis perfectly illustrates this. Rather than even consider the need for widespread corporate restructuring of the Church, the problem is cast entirely in individualistic terms, and we are told that no major reforms are needed, leaving the male-only monopoly on decision-making power fully intact. Now, if one wanted to design the most disastrously vulnerable ecclesial structures imaginable, this would be exactly the model one would choose. The entire system is fatuously premised upon the belief that men in holy orders are somehow exempt from the temptations and degradations of original sin, which so often manifest themselves in what Augustine of Hippo famously called libido dominandi. That lust for power, that lust to dominate, is given free rein and open license in current Catholic structures, where there are no mechanisms of accountability or real clerical scrutiny at any level. As a result, the abuse crisis has been allowed to run riot across the Church for decades, and it will not end until and unless, at a minimum, these structures are themselves fundamentally reconfigured in radical ways. My book, Everything Hidden Shall Be Revealed, Ridding the Church of Abuses of Sex and Power, published 2 years ago this month, outlines the history, the theology, and the ecumenical appeal of major structural reforms, which I can only give here in the briefest of outlines. In fact, I will give you just 2 examples of what I think are important structural reforms, inspired in part by what I have found in the Anglican Church of Canada, the church I grew up in, as it happens, and even more so in the Armenian Apostolic Church. In both bodies, the latter especially, we see canons and structures that require every parish to have a council with both voice and vote. This council must work with the bishop to determine when a new priest is needed and why, and it must have its voices and votes respected by both priest and bishop. The adoption of such approach in the Catholic world would cut off the possibility of a bishop moving an abuser out of a parish while not telling the people why, or dropping that abuser into another parish, again, not telling the people why. Moving up to the diocesan, regional, and national levels, and again inspired by Anglican and Armenian examples, among others, I argue for similar reforms in the Catholic Church, including not just the local election of parish priests, but of bishops, who are held accountable in obligatory annual synods with their people. Synodal election and accountability in the Catholic world would ensure that no more can bishops escape from telling their diocese what they did or failed to do and why. No more can they act as the last remaining sovereign princes, aloof from their people and indifferent to them, while nonetheless spending millions of their donations to fund lavish retirements, as we saw this month, excuse me, the disgraceful Donald Wuerl, late of Washington, D.C. No more can bishops, if they are guilty of abuse, or of cover-up, or of other massive malpractice, avoid being confronted by their people and held to account. In this light, then, properly constituted synods elect their bishops, meet at least annually under his presidency to pass legislation for the diocese, and vote the bishop's budget up or down. These are three basic tasks. There are others. In many synods, moreover, the bishop presents an annual report on his conduct and specifies the priorities for the coming year, and the people have a chance to challenge him on both his priorities and his failings. Bishops who fail disastrously can be put on trial through mechanisms commonly found in other churches, and again outlined in my book. These structural proposals are concerned with choking off present and future cases of abuse. But what about those who are, in the present moment, already suffering from harm and trauma at the hands of bishops, priests, and others in the church? Where are the structures to help them experience deeper healing right now? Here's where we move to my second proposal, which would be a chance for churches to work in ways that are inspired in part by Pope Francis's celebrated image of the church as a field hospital, with all of its connotations of clinical flexibility and innovations in healing. This proposal is modeled after something the clinicians Howard Fradkin and Jim Struve have recently set forth in their chapter, Empowering Male Survivors to Heal Through Community and Peer Connections, which is a chapter in Richard Gartner's excellent recent book, Healing Sexually Betrayed Men and Boys, Treatment for Sexual Abuse, Assault, and Trauma, published in 2018 by Routledge. Borrowing and adapting their model, I am now in the process of working with several partners to set up similar groups for victims of physical, sexual, emotional, and spiritual abuse at the hands of any religious institution, with a particular focus on the Catholic Church. These groups are inspired by another major book, which is Irvin Yalom's landmark book, The Theory and Practice of Group Psychotherapy. And in light of Yalom's well-known criteria for successful groups, these proposed groups would seek to work on 10 of the 11 goals that Yalom elaborates. All of this in the current plan would be done in groups of roughly 12 to 15 people meeting weekly for a couple of hours over the course of about 12 weeks. Ideally, as we emerge from the pandemic, these groups would be able to meet in person. But in my clinical experience recently, some groups also work well over Zoom or Teams or similar technology, and this can certainly be arranged depending on the local context and need. Following Gartner and others, there is a strong clinical case for having separate groups for men and for women, whose admission in either case would be after a short interview to screen for suitability. At that time, some would-be participants might also be recommended for individual therapy, either in lieu of or as an adjunct to their group participation, depending upon the severity of their suffering in the presence of comorbid disorders, including substance abuse, which is commonly found in those who have been accused as children. This proposal is for a more classically psychoeducational and psychotherapeutic group directed by clinicians. I am donating my time to these groups. But in other cases, it would be right and just that clinicians actually be paid, and parishes and dioceses should be funding such labors as one form of reparations to victims. And bishops and priests should be required to sit in on such groups from time to time as appropriate to hear these stories. But I do not want our imagination to be limited to only such groups. More informal groups could be set up in parishes by those willing to do so. Here, of course, one thinks immediately of the entirely volunteer-led self-help groups, such as AA and other 12-step programs, which run free of charge in church basements and community centers every day of the year on every continent of this planet. Regardless of what form they take, the important thing is that groups need to exist as one place where further healing can begin to happen right now. Victims need both the healing and, especially from what I've been hearing from them, an end to the acute sense of isolation and shame and guilt they have been saddled with by a church content to leave them on the peripheries. These two tasks, synodal structures at every level in the church to foreclose further opportunities for the abuses of sex and power, and therapeutic groups to offer some measure of broader healing right now, are two ways that have not been seriously tried in the Catholic Church until now, but whose importance and potential make them very much overdue opportunities we must hasten to embrace, so that, in W.H. Auden's phrase, we will be able to approach the future as a friend, without a wardrobe of excuses, without a set mask of rectitude or an embarrassing, overfamiliar gesture.